My name's Chelsea Castle. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. I'm a senior director of brand and content, and I will be talking about how to build an audience with written content. I'll start with a story. In 1964, a man named Phil had an idea. This idea, more of a hunch, really, was about the quality of a pair of Japanese shoes. So he went to Japan to check them out. He eventually became a US distributor for Onitsuka Tiger, a Japanese brand of running shoes. Back in the US, selling was slow at first. He and his business partner, Bill, knew that the best way to build demand and build trust was to get well-known runners to wear the shoes. So that's what they did. Eventually, they stopped distributing from Japan and began making their own running shoes. They went on to become Nike. But in 1984, when they were ready to expand beyond running shoes, they had more business problems. They were not well known in a crowded space, so they had little trust. So this time, they took a big bet to build trust once again, this time by taking a big bet on a rookie basketball player named Michael Jordan. Now, this move will be forever legendary in the marketing history books. They spent their entire marketing budget. Could you imagine? The deal that Jordan almost said no to went on to become a brand worth more than $10 billion. So you can see, I think there's a large percentage of people here wearing Nikes on their shoes. And what drives that monetary value? The audience behind it. Building an audience starts with trust. In our industry, building trust starts with content. So I want to put it all out there. We have been doing written content wrong. And here's why. The majority of B2B content is self-serving. It's created to talk about us and our products and our company. It's not about our customers. We're so focused on our own pipeline targets. Second, much of content in our space feels and sounds inhuman. A lot of the content doesn't have much personality or an inkling of a vibe. We're so focused on writing for bots and SEO. I know y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. And lastly, we have a trust problem. The majority of companies who have public trust outperform their peers by 400%. And yet, our buyers don't trust us. Here's proof. According to a recent study by Organic Growth Marketing, 12% of buyers said that software companies are trusted sources of information. 12% of our buyers trust us. 55% said that B2B content feels too similar, and 39% said that they zone out or glaze over our content. I don't know about y'all, but that's pretty sad. I don't want them to zone out or glaze over my content. All of this is a direct result of years of chasing rankings, chasing MQLs, of sales and marketing misalignment, and creating marketing to check a box. And many other things I'm sure we can all bond over at happy hour later. And this lack of trust that we see in the market, Nike had the same problem. They were not well known in a small space. Here's how they fixed it. They started by changing their mindset. Meet my Mac framework. If you were wondering why I walked out to Return of the Mac, it's A, a good way to remember my framework, and B, to me, it's a great call for us all to remember to return to what content should be. And that's what I'll outline in my framework here. It's about mindset, audience, and content creation. I'll walk through each piece step by step, and at the end, I will share a QR code where you can keep in touch with me, but also steal all of my frameworks and templates for you to take and use in your day-to-day. I also have a surprise guest at the end. So step one of the framework is going into it with the right mindset, having a lush mindset. Content should be likable. Do you know what your audience likes and dislikes? Do you know what makes them laugh? Do you know what lights them up, what motivates them? Do you know what keeps them up at night, why they do what they do? All of these things together are important to ensure you're creating content that they actually like, as opposed to thinking about, oh, will my boss like this? Will my friend, my colleague at work like this? We want to think about making it likable for our audience first. Second is user integrated. Now, you won't be able to do this in every piece of content, but we want to involve our users in our content whenever possible. So you want to think about creating content by content requests. This is one of my favorite ways to create content, by literally asking them what they want and what they need from you. When we're selling SaaS to other SaaS companies, at the end of the day, our goal is to make their jobs easier and to help them. So why don't we just ask them? One way to do that outside of content requests is to involve them in interviews, user-generated content, that sort of thing. You want to think about integrating your user before you integrate your product. I'm not saying not to integrate your product, just saying to rethink your prioritization there. Third is you want your content to be shareable. If your content is compelling enough to share, it's going to be, of course, you're going to expand your reach, but you want it to resonate so strongly that they feel good to share it. It feels good to share something. It feels good to share a piece of content that is relatable to other people in your network, and it also says something about you too. So keeping that in mind when you're creating content will create content that resonates. And lastly, you want to be human to human. You want your content to ensure that you are speaking to the other human on the other end. You want to create content that people want to read and kind of think beyond writing for algorithms. The red thread throughout the mindset is to create content while thinking about the human on the other end. Now, it sounds simple, but we don't see this in practice very much. So, speaking about humans, one of the best ways, or I guess this is the A in my MAC framework. So we've talked about having the right mindset. Now we want to talk about how we're actually getting to know those people, right? So there's actually been a theme in some of the conversations we've been having since this morning around trust and brand and speaking like a human. And I think we can all talk about it and say that and know it, but how do you actually do it? So this part is really key here, is the audience research portion. I have two prongs in my audience research work. First is internal. So you want to think about having one source of truth. That's usually like a spreadsheet. Like I mentioned, I have some templates and frameworks at the end that I'll share with you. I have one really great system for organizing this research. So definitely check that out. Your internal research is anyone who is internal. So sales and CS, it can come from anyone in the company, but usually those two functions within the company. And this is where you're kind of aggregating any common objections from the sales team, any content requests that come up. What are some of the most frequently asked questions to support? You also want to share the spreadsheet so that it's easy for them to dump anything that they're hearing in their conversations into the spreadsheet. Now, not everyone will do this, right? Because, I'm going to be speaking, when Arthur was in sales, I'm going to be like, hey, Arthur, on top of everything else you're doing, can you also, add some ideas to my content list? That's not feasible. But it is in their best interest if I create a piece of content about a common objection that he hears, and then we can share that to hopefully mitigate that process and speed up the buying process. So it's very beneficial, it's mutually beneficial, but you want to make it as easy and frictionless as possible for them to contribute to the spreadsheet. The second is external. So these are all of the customer calls, customer interviews that you might have, where you're sourcing questions, common challenges, what you're hearing in the market. Ideally, you should be having some customer, some common cadence, customer conversations in some capacity, and you're dumping all of that in the same spreadsheet so you have one source of truth. Also think about doing some research, some surveys, and audience research tools like SparkToro. So you're dumping everything in this one spreadsheet. To me, this is all of your gold. This is your data mining. So you're collecting all of these inputs, all of this gold. Now what do you do with it? Has anyone ever heard of empathy maps? One person? Okay, cool. I'm going to show you. I'm going to first talk about empathy versus sympathy. I think a lot of people get those two confused. I wouldn't be me if I didn't talk about Brené Brown, who describes empathy as being, you're talking about how someone, you're not talking about an experience, you're talking about how someone is feeling about an experience. So that is a great mindset to have, and that is one of the most important aspects of why it's important to do the audience research. So again, that's all of your gold. Now you're gonna mine it in a map. There are a whole bunch of different kinds of empathy maps that I use in B2B. This is one of the most basic ones. It gives you a holistic view of what your ICP is saying, thinking, doing, and feeling when it comes to the intersection of them and you and how you help. Nike has a great origin story, right? They have a great story, they have a great brand, they're very successful, but they're not infallible. When they make a mistake or they have a public blunder, they lean on empathy to course correct. Empathy drives connection, and connection and empathy drive trust. We get so caught up in conversion in our work that we often miss the opportunity for connection. When you think about some of the marketing that you've put out in the last year, did you ever think about how the other person on the other end is going to feel? How do you think they feel about your passive CTA on the side of your blog? How do you think they feel when they read your newsletter and they click on a link to a gated piece of content? You got to think about the feelings there. And you might be thinking, yes, I totally have empathy for my audience. Why else do I do what I do, right? But here's the thing. Would your marketing agree? Do you think your marketing aligns with that mentality? Seth Godin has a really great quote around this where he says that I don't think you have any business being a marketer if you don't have empathy for the people you're seeking to serve. So I think that's a great way to kind of round out understanding how an empathy map works. I love doing this this empathy map in Miro, literally, or in person if you get the opportunity to work with your teams in person. Add some stickies into each quadrant. Again, if you're thinking about your audience research as your inputs, this is your output. So you're thinking, okay, what is our ICP saying, thinking, doing, and feeling? This is a great example of a very simple empathy map, right, in terms of what would be your ideal buying process, right? So maybe they're thinking, oh yeah, how do I buy this? I'm ready to buy. That's what they're saying. When it comes to thinking, they're saying, okay, wow, this sales process is great. This is obviously what you want them to say. Hopefully they're feeling excited and feeling empowered. And what are they doing? Hopefully they're telling others about the experience. So this is a great example of what that empathy map can look like. A full map, of course, has a lot more to it. I'm going to be doing a deeper demo of an empathy map near the end, but I'm going to talk about the C in my content creation framework so that you can see how the empathy drives into your content. So by a raise of hands, how many of you have spent some time ever writing an article or a blog? So a good bit of you, okay. So you know that there are a lot of things that you have in mind when you're writing, right? You're thinking about not just SEO keywords, you're thinking about your hook, your data, your stats, and how and where to include them, probably some storytelling, some personal anecdotes. Then you have graphs and charts and photos and GIFs. You have all these things that are already in your head. And that's not even to think about, okay, what about my goals? How am I distributing this? So there's already a lot. Writing is hard because it's a distillation of information. So that is to say that my content creation framework is simple by design. It's simple so that you're entering it with the right mindset. You're doing the work of deeply understanding your audience through research, talking to them directly, talking to the internal teams who are speaking with them directly. And then the content framework is how you apply all of that when you're actually writing, on top of everything else that's in your head when you're writing, right? That is to say that my framework is simple as pie, which I don't know about you, but the last time I made pie, it actually wasn't that simple, so I should probably rethink that phrase. So this is a great example of my content creation framework, or I call it a flow. They are your friendly signposts, right, that guide you through to think about what your audience is feeling per section of your article. To the left-hand side are your headlines, intros or leads for any of my fellow former journalists out there. And then, of course, every article is going to look different. You can also apply this to video scripts. I was speaking with someone earlier about video scripts. You can apply it to a LinkedIn post. You can apply it to anything that's written and non-written, honestly. But the goal is to think through each section, and you're mapping out the desired sentiment next to it. You're guiding through. You're really trying to think about the necessary ingredients to resonate and serve value. Your core idea here is to make them feel something. Your goal isn't an action. It's a reaction. Your goal is to provoke, and this helps you do it. So if you're thinking about a headline, I probably want my headline to be something that creates a desired sentiment there you go. You want to integrate your headline to be something that has intrigue, right? I want them to see it, and I want them to have some intrigue, and probably a desire to learn. And the intro and hook, I want them to feel seen. This is my favorite way to approach content. I want it to be relatable. I want them to feel seen and heard and understood, and hopefully affirmed in whatever the topic is that I'm speaking about. In the supporting graphs, it's really important to build trust. So now that I've gotten them to be interested, to feel something, I then want them to say, oh, I see them as the credible source to be listening to on this topic. And then your following subheads, I like thinking about the content flow like a heartbeat, kind of like having an up and down and like an overall experience, right? So in that first subhead, I want that to have I want them to have an aha moment, like, yes, like they get it, they get me, they understand what my day-to-day is like. Hopefully I'm answering a question too in that subhead, in that section. In the next section, I love the idea of an eyebrow raise. Researcher Sam Horn created this thing called the eyebrow test, where it's essentially you want someone to raise your eyebrow when they read your content. And it's just kind of a way of expressing curiosity, intrigue. You're like, oh, I'm raising my eyebrow here to say like, okay, like you got through my mental door. And then the next section would be something like surprise. Okay, I want them to have like a surprise and delight moment, and they learn something new. And then the ideal conclusion, all of these things are your desired and ideal sentiments. That conclusion, you want them to feel empowered, and you want them to feel hopefully grateful. That might be a bit of a stretch, but hopefully it was so helpful that they feel gratitude for having that piece of content now. So that's how the content creation framework works. So we went through mindset, audience research, and content creation. Now I'm going to bring up a special guest to do an empathy map demo so you can see how those two things intertwine. Without further ado, I'll introduce my friend and former colleague, Kaylee Edmondson, who needs no formal introduction. Oh, is that on?
Can y'all hear me?
There you go.
Hi.
Yeah, we're going to walk through how to build an empathy map with one of Kaylee's core clients. Kaylee, tell us a bit about your core client and their ICP at a high level.
Yeah, absolutely. So I partner with several clients, and this one in particular that I chose for this exercise is a Series C B2B SaaS company that is firmly seated in the InfoSec compliance automation space. Not necessarily the sexiest space, but nonetheless a requirement, so thought it would be good to choose for this exercise.
Beautiful. So as you can see here, this is a real Miro screenshot of when we walked through this exercise. Now, Kaylee's already done the work of having the right mindset, doing the audience research, and now we're going to walk through each quadrant in terms of understanding what they're thinking, feeling, doing, and saying. And then all of this will directly inform content.
Beautiful.
So here, we started in the think and feel space. So go ahead and tell me a little bit about what these people are thinking and feeling.
Yeah, and I'll start with this too. When Chelsea asked me to do this assignment and do some research for this client in particular, they have several market segments that all operate, live, and breathe very differently, all with their very different personas that act as their primary buyer for each of those segments. So for this exercise, I specifically chose their SMB segment, and we'll go deep into that. So this persona is typically someone at a smaller sized company normally who finds themselves in a sales cycle where one of their prospects has come to a sales rep to say, I'd really like to move forward, but doesn't look like you're SOC 2 compliant. That puts that sales rep, that sales manager, most likely your CEO at that stage, in a position to think, honestly, oh shit, we don't have this.
Yeah, hence the oh shit sticky.
Yes, so that's the oh shit sticky. But normally a CEO at an early stage company is faced with this feeling of, oh shit, now I'm in a reactive scenario where I don't know if I'm the best person to be leading this forward, but I know I need to go and find a solution to get us compliant.
So they also might be thinking like, okay, we also know we need it, but it's not a top priority. So that is one example. Having that in mind when you're creating a piece of content, that is a really great mindset and little nugget to have when you're like, okay, like now I can speak to that directly in a piece of content, right? They're also probably questioning their order of priorities, which can also inform content.
Yes, probably questioning why they didn't prioritize this sooner, but obviously they're also a startup, so sometimes that's just the reality of the beast. All of this, I think, leads to feelings, right? They're probably feeling maybe a little inadequate for the job. Most CEOs have probably started a project, started a company based on a passion of theirs, and arguably InfoSec compliance probably isn't that passion. So they're probably feeling a little out of sorts, a little out of their comfort zone.
Yeah. And that piece of inadequacy, you may not have known that without doing that research, right, and doing this process. So if you're understanding, like, okay, like they have that feeling of inadequacy, you might be a little more gentle when you're writing about a certain topic that is in relation to what they might be feeling inadequate about.
Yeah. They're also probably feeling a bit of competitive FOMO, right? If you know that they're in a deal cycle with you, considering buying your product, they're also probably in a deal cycle with your competitors, let's be real. And if your competitors are compliant, but you are not, you might lose by default.
I love that one because that could inspire like a whole campaign, right? If you know like they're feeling that competitive FOMO, and if you approach it in the right way, like that could inspire like a whole campaign of content, I think.
Yeah. I think the other stickies that I'd put on here are probably straightforward, but nonetheless, feeling a bit of momentum inadequacy, right? We should have been moving faster. We should have been doing this. We should have been doing that. I think maybe we all feel that to some degree, but definitely this persona in this instance would probably also feel just a little bit of lack of momentum about why this probably wasn't already done or wasn't already prioritized.
Yeah, and understanding why that lack of momentum, well, that's a hard word to say, understanding why that lack of momentum is happening will then inspire more content, right? Like, okay, why is that? And then how can we speak to it in a way that is still being kind to where they're coming from so that we're not being too salesy, too pushy, we're understanding the feelings that they're having behind that experience. And then what are they doing?
Well, they're probably doing a lot, I hope, right? As a CEO at a small, growing startup, they're probably doing a lot. But in this specific instance, I'm hoping that they are understanding why they didn't prioritize InfoSec beforehand, right? So they're probably rushing to take action, maybe with an external legal counsel or a lawyer of some sort, trying to build themselves some type of sounding board to make sure that they're moving forward with confidence and solving this problem not only for themselves, for the pipeline they're leaving on the table, for the clients they hope to serve, but also for their reps that are trying to get this deal off the line.
Yeah, they're also probably trying to rush the process, right? Because they've had that oh shit moment, and then they're like, okay, we should have prioritized this sooner, and now they're trying to rush it, right?
Yep.
But as we know, or at least the little that I know from this space is you can't really rush a SOC 2 audit. But you can maybe create content of like, here are some things to be thinking about while you're waiting for that audit to clear, while you're waiting to become compliant. So having the understanding and knowing what they're feeling about it will help you write content that is more resonant and kind and effective.
Beautiful.
And then what are they saying?
Well, we already said oh shit, but we'll say it again just for jokes. Probably still at this point, they might be saying out loud oh shit. While in their head, they also know that they need to be reassuring their team, don't worry, we've got this, everything is fine, right? And in this exercise, we would need to be some type of confidant in them to help give them that confidence and reassurance to be able to say confidently to their team, don't worry, we've got this.
Yeah. They're also probably seeking legal counsel at this part, right? Like,
Yes.
they probably need some additional help outside of compliance.
Yes, and we all know every good CEO is in 14 no less Slack communities, so they're definitely checking those Slack communities for advice from their peers and from other successful CEOs and founders.
So this is all like pretty in-depth knowledge, I would say, like that you might know some degree, of this level of information about your ICP, but I would be curious if you understand, if you know all of that and feel like you know what they're feeling throughout the whole process. So that is a full empathy map for the most part. Thank you, Kaylee.
Thank you,
so
ma'am.
much. So I went through this pretty quickly. What did we learn today? Today we learned that trust is the most important aspect of building a brand, and we do that with content. In order to build an audience with written content, you need a bit of Mac. You need to have the right mindset, you need to deeply know your audience, and you need to create content that they like and want to share and want to read. And all of these things help build an audience and build a beloved brand. And if you do all of this well, then that leads to revenue. Start using this framework if you want to start making more money with your content. Here's the QR code. You can keep in touch. You can steal all my frameworks, templates. I think the most valuable one that I've seen, at least in use, the feedback that I've gotten is around the audience research portion, where we're all trying to gather, right, all of these inputs, all of these ideas that we get from all of the meetings we're in every day. It's a really great and helpful system to kind of organize all of that so you can actually take action on it and it not get lost in your day-to-day. And thank you so much for having me, and have a good day.